Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Introduction of staff or commissioners and staff.
Let me start.
Amy?
Amy Bublak, city member.
Bill Berryhill, public member.
Jim DeMartini, county member.
Mike Van Winkle, city member.
Terry Withrow, county member.
Sarah Littlepenny, executive officer.
Javier Camarena, Assistant Executive Officer.
Rob Taro, LAFCO counsel.
Jennifer Goss, commission clerk.
All right, we move on to public comment. Anybody that would like to talk about anything that is not on the agenda, now is the time. Seeing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Anybody have any questions?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, correspondence.
There's no specific correspondence for the commission tonight, and there's a few informational correspondence items as noted on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, anybody would like to declare a conflict of interest or disqualification? Now is the time for that. Seeing none, we will get to consent items. Anybody would like one pulled for discussion? Nope. Take a motion on consent items.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving down to public hearing items. Item 7A, proposed amendment to Commission Policy 22, Agricultural Preservation Policy.
Yes. Good evening. This is a follow-up from a piece of correspondence that the commission had received and then directed staff to move forward on. This is a request for a technical amendment to the Agricultural Preservation Strategy, otherwise known as Policy 22. As with any policy amendment, we go through a formal process when we do an amendment. The Ag Preservation Policy was originally adopted in 2012. We did have one amendment that occurred back in 2015. Overall, the policy requires a plan for ag preservation, and included in that is a menu of ag preservation strategies that the commission encourages. So as part of that menu, one of the options for an applicant to use for ag preservation is an in lieu fee, which would be for one-to-one ag mitigation. As the correspondence that we had received previously noted, in the one-to-one in lieu fee portion of that option, there's a section regarding the timing of the collection of in lieu fees that currently states before the issuance of a grading permit, building permit, or final map approval, whichever comes first. And that phrase is intended to be included as part of a city resolution when they go about requiring an in lieu fee, to provide a timing mechanism for when that fee gets collected, to ensure that it's collected at some point tied to the development process. And so whichever comes first was the portion of that that the Keith Schneider, who had written the letter, noted that was a difficulty for developers to actually accomplish, as developers typically like to pay fees or have the fees paid during the building permit process, and typically during each building permit as they're issued. So the proposal would amend that phrase and actually remove whichever comes first, and then also acknowledge the ability for there to be multiple permits involved during the collection. So this is what the ending result looks like. It would just simply say before the issuance of grading permit, building permit, or permits, or final map approval. So as I'd mentioned, we still have to go through kind of the formal process for a policy amendment. We did some initial outreach to the cities, as well as the California Farmland Trust, formerly known as Central Valley Farmland Trust. You might recall, if you were here in 2012, Central Valley Farmland Trust had a lot of input on the original policy and the language that was involved. We'd also gotten some of that original language from other LAFCOs and other cities. I put kind of a chart in there showing kind of the degree of different requirements for timing, and there are some jurisdictions that allow for in lieu fees to be collected at building permit stage. It's not uncommon. We referred it out for formal comment back in early February, and then no written comments were received. We got a no comment letter, of course, from the Environmental Review Commission, and then we had some verbal communications, of course, back and forth with the cities and planning directors in particular, too, and there was no concerns identified. So the environmental analysis portion of this, the CEQA compliance, we found that there's no possibility that the proposed amendment is going to have a significant effect on the environment, and we've prepared a notice of exemption. And that brings me to the staff recommendation, which is to approve the proposed policy amendment and adopt Resolution 2019-05, making the appropriate findings. And staff is available for questions.
Do you have any questions for Sarah's staff before we open this up for public hearing? No?
There was really no opposition to this from the cities, was there?
No.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for a public hearing comment. We have one person right now that would like to speak on this. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Schneider, Keystone Corporation, 1700 Keystone Pacific Parkway, Suite C3 in Patterson. Keystone is a residential and industrial developer based in Patterson. We were instrumental in the development of Keystone Pacific Business Park, Keystone West Business Park, and Patterson Gardens. By way of background, I attended a meeting with Supervisor Jim DeMartini, county staff, and several developers to discuss issues facing future residential development in Stanislaus County. I commented at that meeting that the current LAFCO policy of requiring payment of the Ag Preservation Mitigation in lieu fee before the issuance of a grading permit, building permit, or final map approval, whichever comes first, can affect the developer's ability to proceed with the project, since a grading permit or final map precedes building permits. Having to pay the whole fee up front isn't a financeable expense, and that a developer builder would prefer paying the fee through the project building permits. Supervisor DeMartini suggested I write a letter to LAFCO explaining the issue. I sent the letter in November of last year, and it's part of the staff report as Exhibit A. I subsequently had a chance to meet with Sarah to outline what I thought would be a reasonable compromise to accommodate both the development community while still meeting the goal of ag preservation. We discussed amending the current LAFCO policy to simply drop the whichever comes first wording from paragraph 2B of the Commission Evaluation of a Plan for Agricultural Preservation section. This way, the developer builder can opt to pay his in lieu fee incrementally at the building permit stage. I offer this example of comparing today's policy versus the amended policy. If you take a 100-acre site of row crops valued at $25,000 per acre, to mitigate, the developer would need to pay an in lieu fee of $1 million at time of a grading permit or final map, which comes before the building permits. Again, this is an upfront payment that the developer can't finance. Under the amended policy, assuming the developer builder subdivides the 100 acres into 5 dwelling units per acre, he would pay a mitigation fee of $2,000 per permit, collected by the respective city. The California Farmland Trust then will subsequently receive a consistent and reliable source of mitigation money to purchase meaningful conservation easements. I also want to reiterate the fact that Stanislaus County, San Joaquin County, and Yolo County, in their ag preservation policies, do not have the restrictive whichever comes first clause, therefore giving the developer builder the option to pay the in lieu fee at building permit. I want to commend Sarah on an excellent staff report, and therefore would request your support of the recommended change to the current LAFCO policy. Available to answer any questions you may have of me. Thank you.
Any questions for Keith? Thank you, Keith. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item before we take it up? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing and bring it back to the commissioners for comments.
Just one quick one. How do we, right now, track the cities in collection of the in lieu fees? Do we have something in place, or do we?
We do not. The cities are technically the responsible party, of course, for tracking the mitigation itself. One of the suggestions that was included in the report came from Denny Jackman,
Right.
which was to do an annual report basically asking all the cities how much they've collected so far and then reporting that back to the commission. And I think that's a good idea. Potentially, right now, for example, I'm not aware of any cities that have collected. So when we find out that it's started, we could start doing that, to provide a report. It might be once every 2 years or 3 years, depending on what the activity level is, but.
And how do we find out it started? How do we?
Well, I'm aware of 2 proposals right now that the commission has approved where their resolutions, the city's resolutions have required either one-to-one or in lieu. And I've sort of personally been tracking them as I meet with the planning directors on a monthly basis to get an update of how's that project coming and has anything started.
So if we could just formally,
Yeah.
in case the proverbial bus comes along and catches us here, or any of us here, that we have something in place that really tracks that. I think that'd be great. I think that suggestion was great. So,
Yeah.
just to make sure that we're not letting something slip through the cracks there. Okay,
Definitely.
perfect.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make some comments about the meeting that Mr. Schneider referred to. The county had some concerns about the housing shortages in Stanislaus County. And even though there was about 2,000 acres of already annexed land, there really was nothing being built. So we asked the builders to come in and go over what their problems might be. And actually, some of their comments were not exactly what we were expecting, so we thought we'd get the blame for everything, but we didn't. But anyway, this was one of the issues that came up that we'd actually do something about. So if this is a hindrance to them, unnecessarily burden some, and we just make the changes in the language. We're only changing 3 words, and so we're trying to encourage some building over here, but the reasons they gave why they weren't doing it were different. But this was one problem, so we can solve that, and I think it's our relationship with the building industry to see what their issues are, to not be a hindrance to them and to be, fair and reasonable. And I think this corrects that problem.
I wish all government, all these solutions could be narrowed down to just changing 3 words. I mean, I think that's pretty impressive that this moves forward with just that change, so.
Well,
yeah,
that'll be an
kudos.
improvement. I mean, there's
Yeah.
all the other issues of, other fees.
Unlike the 9 worst words in the American language, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. I think this is what we've identified as something that might help.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
We have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Item 8, other business, termination of dissolution proceedings for reclamation district number 1602, 2031, and 2101.
Yes. So this is a business item. It's actually carried over from the January meeting. This is in response to an interesting piece of legislation that had recently passed regarding inactive districts and sort of a forced dissolution process through LAFCO, through required timeframes. So in January, we had started the process. We initiated dissolution of 3 districts that were identified by the State Controller's Office as being inactive. And we had a remaining 90 days to continue reaching out to the districts to determine whether or not they met the qualifications for inactive. So since January, we've done some ongoing outreach with the districts themselves and then also with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And since that time, we have obtained information both from the districts and Central Valley Flood Protection Board regarding the status of each of these reclamation districts, and we have found that they do not meet the legal definition for inactive. They have ongoing contracts with the state for maintenance of their various flood infrastructures, and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board was very concerned about the process overall, but also concerned that another state entity was requesting dissolution of districts that that their own entity was working with currently. So hopefully now we can clear that up, but for the LAFCO side of that process, we would be stopping the dissolution or terminating the dissolution proceedings. The recommendation would be that you adopt a resolution stating such, which would be 2019-07, and then that resolution also directs me to notify the State Controller's Office of that determination so that they will be removed from the inactive list. They do get an annual review of their status from the State Controller, so this could come up again, but we would hope not. But this was a interesting exercise for us to go through, and hopefully this is the completion of our compliance with it.
Okay, any questions for Sarah's on this item, or any comments?
Just the results surprised me because there wasn't any activity we could find, but apparently there was some. Good thing you took that extra step.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Take a motion then.
A motion to approve?
Second?
We have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Item 9, Commissioner comments. Amy, you want to start?
I have nothing.
I got nothing.
Sure.
I just had a question, and I really meant to ask you before the meeting, but I forgot. The, you know, that issue with the mobile home park who wanted the sewer line, and there was some question about whether or not they were going to annex to the city or we were going to allow an out-of-service agreement. Do you have any idea what the status of that is?
Yeah, it recently went to the City Planning Commission and was approved, and now the next step, in the next couple of weeks, it'll go to the City Council for their approval, and from then, city staff would be directed to make application with LAFCO. So it has one more step to go through before it gets to us.
So, do you know if they've hooked up to the city's sewer system without being annexed?
Yeah, I'd asked them last week, and I guess they were still doing some work out there. The rain had kind of gotten in the way of some of it. But I went by there too, and there was definite signs of activity.
So your feeling is they will annex, come to us for an annexation at some point?
Yeah, as long as the City Council approves it. If things don't go weird at the City Council, I'll be at that meeting as well to answer any of their questions.
Okay, I was just curious. I meant to ask you earlier and I forgot. Okay, that's all I have.
That's it. Terry? I have no comments either. We'll move on to item 10, additional matters at the discretion of chairperson. I have nothing for this. Item 11, executive officers report.
Just a couple things to note. For April, we'll have the proposed budget, and then we will also have the Whitmore Ranch reorganization to the city of Ceres. You got a piece of correspondence today just noting that there's a large amount of documentation for that item. So we've already got the larger documents online if you want to take a look at them in advance.
Yeah, I looked at some of that this past week. I think that's the first subdivision I know that's going out of the dirt here quite a while, so
Yeah.
good move. Any other comments, sir?
Nope, that's all.
No? Okay. Adjournment.